Well, good evening and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and on this evening's program, I have with me as guest Dr. David Hinds, and as usual, we'll be talking about the current political situation here in Guyana. Welcome to the program, Dr. Hinds.
Thank you very much, Dion.
Well, to begin, we need to focus on the fact that a new chairman of GCOM has been appointed based on the agreement by President David Granger and the opposition. Now, what are your thoughts on this new development?
Well, the WPA welcomes the agreement on the chair of GCOM. As you know, we have argued that the CCJ was very clear that the process by which the chair was going to be selected would be one of cooperation and consensus. As we know, the Constitution says that the opposition leader should submit 6 names, not unacceptable to the president, and the president chooses one. But I think the court recognizes that unilateralism has been harmful to the process. And as you know, it's the court ruled that President Granger's unilateral appointment of the GCOM chair the last time around was unconstitutional. And although it did not make a ruling, it did make a recommendation that in terms of choosing the 6 names, rather than the opposition leader alone choosing those names, that the president and the opposition leader choose the names. Now, people were saying that, well, if the president help in choosing the names, then he, of course, will choose somebody that he would eventually choose. And people had become very cynical about the process. In the end, they were able to agree on one name, Justice Claudette Singh. Together they agreed on a name, and I think that is what the CCJ had asked for. So in the end, after all this shadow boxing and finger pointing, in the end, they did exactly what the CCJ said that they should do, and what the WPA was saying that they should do. Now, what is instructive in this whole process is that we had a whole set of organizations, such as the Private Sector Commission and some others, who were saying Mr. Granger has no role, and that the Constitution says that the opposition leader should pick the names. And they were ignoring the recommendation of the CCJ. And so, in effect, they were inciting Mr. Jagdeo. Mr. Jagdeo originally agreed that the president had a role to play. He went along with the process and then suddenly decided the president has no role and that he alone should pick the names. All right? When the president stuck to his guns and said, no, there is a role for me. Here is what the CCJ said. Eventually, Mr. Jagdeo came to the table, and together they were able to come up with Claudette Singh. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that we now have a chairman of the commission that has the confidence of both leaders. And that is what the CCJ was arguing for all the time. And you know, the WPA chides these people who had been inciting Mr. Jagdeo not to come to the table and to agree in a consensual manner to the chairman of GCOM. Eventually did that, and he did so because Mr. Granger stood his ground, and some of us, like the WPA and the PNC, argued that the CCJ was very clear.
You know, one of the things that seems to be prominent in this whole selection process is that people are of the view that the chairman must be somehow aligned to some side that she would favor or he would favor one or the other political party in the whole process, election process, and that neutrality is not something that should be a consideration. How, because when you look at what people have been saying on Facebook, even with the appointment of Justice Claudette Singh, some of them are wondering, whether she will be favorable. Why Jagdeo pick? They don't trust her. This what really should this trust be about?
Well, we live in a society that is divided along ethno-political lines, and one has to expect that supporters of one side is going to want the institutions of the society to work in their favor, whether it's the chairman of the commission or the Supreme Court or the High Court or the CCJ. They all would want them to root on their side, and we have to understand that. I think we have got to accept that fact, that in all societies people are biased in favor of their own ideals and their own political party and so forth, and you are going to have that. But leaders are the ones who have to be above the fray. So I don't have a problem with PPP supporters wanting the GCOM chair to be in their favor, or supporters of the coalition. One expects that to happen, but it is the leaders who have to rise above the fray and to come to a consensus on the leaders. Look, if coalition followers feel that they were ever going to get a chairman that is 100% favorable to them, they were fooling themselves. In the same way, if PPP supporters thought that they were going to get a PPP person who is totally favorable to them as the chair of the commission, they were fooling themselves. But you have to put that out there. In the end, it is the consensus. That is, you have a chairperson who has the credentials of impartiality. All right. It is very difficult in any society to find quote unquote neutral people. All right. But that when you pick a person for a position like that, that person ought to have the credentials of impartiality. Now, in any society, it's very difficult to really say what those credentials are. But in a basic sense, one would hope that the person who is the chairperson is not someone who is overtly well known to be aligned to one side or the other. All right? Now, as citizens, we all have our preferences, our partisan preferences. It was instructive. I was at a workshop at the University of Guyana this past week, and Major General Singh, Joe Singh, was there, and he was talking about his tenure as Army Chief and as Chairman of the Elections Commission. He said during that period he never voted, and I don't doubt him, but he said that given the role he was playing as head of the army and then head of the Elections Commission, these were roles that that call for someone to be impartial. And so he said, in the spirit of impartiality, he never voted when he held those office. And I found that fascinating, So I'm saying that people will have their own private political positions. But when you hold those positions that call for impartiality, you have to will yourself to rise above your partisan considerations. And I find Joe Singh's position that he took very fascinating.
Well, I've been reading one person who is always, making comments in relation to what is happening, and to somehow bring up some kind of feeling that Justice Singh may not be impartial. She is raising the case of the ID card situation on former the late president Janet Jagan. Now, how fair is that in terms of, because in her pronouncement she did give legal considerations for the decision that she made. Now, how can you bring that now to this situation to contend that because she went against what seemed to be a PPP position,
Yeah.
that she's going to be unfavorable
Again,
today.
it is one of the things we have to live with, Dion. I mean, I don't dismiss people's views on things. I think it's quite insultive if you're a public person to dismiss people's position. So I wouldn't dismiss that person who hold that position. I understand that person's position, I understand why they hold that position. I understand that it's part of our political culture. And so I'm not going to dismiss that person. I would say that person has a right to feel that way. There are other people on the other side who have some concerns about Justice Singh or last name. Is causing concern for people on the coalition side. These are things that we have to understand in the society, and my argument is that it calls for leadership. You know, it is leaders who have to take the lead in saying that we are divided, but we have to support consensus and cooperation. I'm a WPA member, and sometimes when I go and speak on radio programs, television, I don't speak as WPA. You know, I express some WPA's views, but I don't say I'm here representing the WPA. Sometimes I take positions which the WPA itself is not comfortable with. But it's in my role as a political commentator, as a public scholar, I take positions that are not partisan. When I'm partisan, like now, I'm sitting here as a WPA member. WPA is part of the coalition. I'm taking a partisan position. And so I'm saying those of us who consider ourselves leaders and public commentators have to be able to balance our partisan affiliation and partisan views with objective views. At the end of the day, I'm a Guyanese, and I would like to think that when I am explaining something to the wider population, sometimes I have to take positions that are contrary to my party and the coalition to which my party belongs. You know, I've been berated for 4 years by coalition supporters who have called me all kinds of names because I in my capacity as a political activist and political commentator, I have disagreed openly with the coalition. I've disagreed with policies, I've disagreed with its praxis, and so forth. All right, and I think that I owe that to the public, to tell the truth and to try as much as possible to be impartial when it comes to these big things. Over the last week, 4 weeks, I've said very publicly that I've taken a position and I've made my choice electorally. And so therefore, when I speak most of the time now, I'm speaking as a partisan political person. And you know, some PNC people and some of the coalition supporters, you know, were angry with me and now dismayed. Hinds has now caught his senses. Well, Hinds caught his senses all the time. But as a public person, you shouldn't be teaching this population to only see things from the perspective of their party. Because if you do that, you defeat our need for consensus on certain matters.
But it also leads to bigotry and all the other negatives that can go along with that. I mean, if we look at the situation currently in the United States, then we understand where that can lead. I mean, simply sitting back and allowing excesses to be perpetrated in a society simply because you're aligned to that force, eventually turns back to haunt you.
Yeah, I have
and people don't seem to understand
that. But you know, I have a slight disagreement. I don't think those things which people express are the cause of the problem. They're the effects of the problem, the consequence. The problem is these societies are grounded in very deep-seated ethnic and racial suspicions and fears. I don't think people are racist. There are people who are openly racist, and you see some of them in their comments on Facebook and so on. But I would like to think that the majority of Guyanese, African and Indian Guyanese and Amerindians and other people of ethnic groups aren't racist. They are expressing in most cases ethnic fears of being dominated by the other side. Because when you have the government, you have power. All right. So if you are African Guyanese and you are in charge of the government, the fear of other ethnic groups is that you are going to use the power of government to execute your ideas of supremacy, your ethnic group, the views of your ethnic group, right? Which is where the PPP ended up. The PPP ended up with a praxis of ethnic domination, right? That they were using the power of the government, using the power of the state to marginalize particularly African Guyanese. They were using policies of the government to work against the interest of African Guyanese. And so that's where the racism comes in. It is when people who have these ideas of supremacy are in charge of the state, and then they use the power of the state to execute their ethnic dominant ideas and their racist ideas. I think ordinary people who you're talking about in Facebook are expressing their fears, and I don't agree with the way they express it, but we have to understand that after 180 odd years of living in this place and the circumstances in which the ethnic groups came, that there are going to be suspicions. I think it's incumbent upon the leaders, both the government and the opposition, to strike a tone in the country, a tone of compromise and cooperation and conciliation. I think that if the leaders lead the way, the followers will follow. Yeah.
And one other thing that you mentioned, the domination of the Africans, but at the same time they were using that political leverage to try to control and to dictate to the Amerindians. When you listen to Nigel Aramlal and so on, you realize that they began to feel as though the Amerindians belonged to them. And so that kind of power that they
but we in the WPA have to set an example. That is my thing. I'm here as WPA. And as WPA, I'm saying that we have to set an example on these things. It's not, again, I don't dismiss people, right? But I'm saying that as political parties and as political leaders, we have to set the example. We have to be able to say that there is another way. We understand your positions and so on, but there is another way. And it is for that reason that I argue that at both at the personal level, but also at the party level, that we, after careful consideration, concluded that as imperfect as the coalition is, and it is imperfect, right? As bad as the coalition has treated us, and it has treated the WPA badly, we feel that after careful consideration, the things that WPA feel very strongly about, we feel that the coalition as a plural government stand the better chance of realizing those things. So we are not supporting the return of the coalition and remaining the coalition because we are anti-Indian or anti-PPP. We are saying that we have a vision and a view of where this country must go. We feel that working class people in their at the place of work and as people who contribute to producing things in this country, who keep the government working, who cut the cane and so on, that working class people should have a living wage, that they should not have to live in economic fear. And so we feel that those are something that we are working towards. We want poverty to be wiped off the face of Guyana. And we are saying that those policies stand a better chance. We're not saying we know yet. A better chance of being considered by the coalition. WPS, as you know, and as the viewers would know, WPS recommended one of the ways of ensuring that working people, poor people, contribute directly when the oil and gas company have put forward a policy initiative that is called cash transfer. We feel that that initiative stand a better chance of being implemented under the coalition government than under the PPP government. At least the WPA is in the coalition, and we will argue in the coalition for it to become a reality. With the PPP, we are outside of the PPP. The PPP is a one-party government, and so we will have to pressure the PPP from the outside. But with the coalition, we can pressure what? From the outside and the inside. And so therefore, the coalition government stand a better chance. We are not going around talking about how wonderful the coalition has been. There are others who can talk about that. That's their message. Our message is very clear. This government has made mistakes. Some of it were beyond their control, but others were certainly within their control to not to make them. But they've made those mistakes, and the WPA is satisfied that we have criticized those mistakes when they happened, and we are saying that we are part of the coalition. We are not going to be the yes men and yes women in the coalition. We are, as members of the coalition, we will play our role to ensure that the government is re-elected. Not because we feel they're flawless, and I have to keep saying that. Not because we think they're flawless, not because we think they've not made mistakes, not because we think that when they're re-elected, they will not do some of the things they've already done. But we are saying that given our proximity to them in the coalition, we stand a better chance of pressuring them to do some of the things that we feel strongly about.
Well, one of the contentious issues right now relates to the current house-to-house registration. The fact is that Vincent Alexander was on the program here some time ago, and he was saying that matters that were dealt with by the chairman at the time, that in law, that those matters should not be considered, because even under the PPP, even with the case with Janet Jagan and so on, and even with the case with the AFC and the Linden seat that they had not gotten, that actions were carried out. But when those actions would have taken place, when the decision of the court comes about, that you cannot go and overturn those decisions. The PPP seems to be of the view that even though the Elections Commission had already agreed under the previous chairman for house to house that it should be rolled back, that it should be stopped, that it should not be carried out. What is your take on
the WPA's take on that? Is that what the chairman assented to is the law, and what happens after that cannot overturn that. All right, the chairman assented to house registration, and so it means that the house registration exercise is not illegal. Now, again, the other people have to do their work. I think part of our weakness on our side is that we listen a lot to what the other side is saying, and we're not answering and saying that here is our position. Here's the WPA position. We are saying to viewers out there that the propaganda that the house registration is illegal is precisely that. It is propaganda. It is not illegal. All right? The big question is why house registration as opposed to claims and objection. All right? Claims and objection can help to sanitize the list, but it will be mere reforming the list. We are arguing that based on what we know of the list, there are some deep-seated problems in the list. And I like to give the example that according to GCOM, there are about 20,000 ID cards that were not uplifted since the last elections. What that means is that there are 20,000 people on the list who don't have ID cards, but their names are on the list. Who are those 20,000 people? Are they dead? Have they migrated? Where are they? We don't know. The only way we can know for sure where they are, whether they have migrated, whether they're dead, is to do house-to-house registration. all right, where we start, as Vincent has argued, from ground zero, all right, you start clean, all right. Now, if you live in in paradise, you're not likely to go into Enmore or go into Enterprise and know whether somebody whose name is on the list to know whether they're dead or not. All right, that's the one of the weaknesses with claims and objectives. You can do claims and objectives in your community because you can say, Mr. Tom, whose name is on the list, he dead. Take him off, right? Because you know Mr. Tom, you're from the same village, right? But when you go into another area where sometimes people have the same name, that's very common in certain communities. You don't know. And so there is a limitation to what claims and objections could do to clean a list that is as tainted as ours. Some people say 200,000. Some people say it's not so many. It's about 50,000. The point is, even if it's 50,000 voters is 10. That represents 10 seats. Even if it's just the 20,000, that's 4 seats. So what I'm saying is that in a country where elections are decided on a slim margin, 1-seat majority, the present government has, it means therefore that you have to ensure that you have a list that is clean, because 4,000 votes is a difference. So if you have a list with 8,000 votes that are compromised, that's 2 seats, and that can make the difference between a government and the opposition, right? So I'm saying to you out there that do not fall for that propaganda, because that's what it is. What we are trying to do is to ensure that you have the cleanest list, because a few thousand votes could make a difference. All right? So why the haste on the part of the PPP to do house registration, claims and objections, and to have elections at the earliest period? Because, they have their own agenda, and their agenda fits in with elections tomorrow with a tainted list, right? Our agenda ought not to be that. Our agenda is that we want the cleanest list, because we want to give ourselves the widest chance of winning this election. And the way you do that is to argue for credible election. Do we have a partisan interest in a clean list? We do. Because with a clean list, we stand a better chance of extending our lead beyond 1 vote to 2 or 3, 1 seat to 2 or 3 seats. It is not that we want to delay the elections and all of those things. We have to put our voices out there and let our supporters and PPP supporters know what the truth is. Because where the PPP has the edge over us is that they have a big media presence, both in the traditional media and the social media. And our side has not worked out yet how to counter that. Well, the WPA is saying that we are going to let our voice be heard in countering some of these things.
Okay, well, so we encourage people to register when the representatives who are doing that registration come to your homes and do not pose a difficulty to them. The law stipulates that if you don't register that you can be charged, but we don't want to use that axe over the heads of people.
Dion, if PPP supporters don't want to register, I'm glad. I mean, let me be frank with you. I this thing about locking them up because they don't want to register, I think it's total nonsense, right? I want our side to win, all right? And if Mr. Jack Diop is so stupid to tell his people not to register, then if you don't register, you don't vote. And if their supporters don't register and don't vote, it's better for us. So this business about scaring them and tell if you don't register, that's not our business. That's GCOM, and the impartial thing do that. If hardcore PPP supporters don't want to register, that is their business, and that is going to be to our advantage. Our thing is to say to our hardcore supporters and also those what we call soft voters on both sides of the political divide, we are encouraging you to go out and register, because we have to look after our interests. You see, at this point, this is a political warfare. This is electoral warfare. And we have to look after our interests. So we are saying to all our supporters out there and potential supporters to go out and vote, go out and register, because that is extremely important. And don't fall for the propaganda. If you know anything about the PPP, they're right now in the bottom houses and in the creases in the villages telling their supporters to register. Don't fall for that propaganda. The PPP has been around a long time. They're very wily. They're taking that public position because they want to stop the registration. But I bet you, privately, they're telling their supporters to go and register. I think certain fight is not our fight, right? Our fight now is to get our supporters to register. And we have some supporters who are resisting registration because they're despondent. They didn't feel that our government put its best feet forward. There are some of our partners who will quarrel with them. The WPA is not quarreling with them. The WPA understands why some of our supporters are frustrated. We understand why some of our supporters are despondent. And we want to speak. We want to speak. If you want WPA to come and to reason with you, to pull you back, call us. We're going to come and talk to you and to say to you that at the end of the day, there is disappointment. It's natural. Not natural, but part of our experience is that our governments have not always looked after our interests. But we are at a critical juncture in our history. And that juncture is that come what may, in another year when the oil well begins to come, who manages that wealth is going to be one of the most important things, because that wealth could help to solve a lot of the big structural problems that we have had. And we know that our supporters, given their own history, have some structural problems that need to be solved. And so therefore, we cannot at this juncture play around with who governs. So yes, we understand why you're despondent. In some instance, we are despondent with you, because we ourselves have not been happy about what has been happening for the last 4 years. But as I said earlier, that you have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is that we have to take another chance with this government. But this time, the chance we're taking is not to put them in office and then sit back and do nothing. We are saying return the coalition to office on condition. And the condition is that they put a better foot forward. There's no guarantee. But if you empower the WPA and other such organizations and individuals to be the ones who will pressure the government once we return to office to take a better position, then we will be doing something more than we did the last time. There's always this thing, oh, these small parties bring nothing. All right? Well, we bring a lot, because there's some of our supporters have been arguing. I can't keep up. The WPA cannot keep up with the request that we are having to go and talk to people. In our own village, I got so people, Dr. Hinds, the people down at Friendship Back Dam side, giving us a hard time. They don't want to register. I have to go down there. People are calling me at Brush Dam front. Some of the people are saying, look, these people are giving. We need to get into those places and to talk to those people. That is the value that a party like the WPA brings, and so forth. And so what we need to do is to do that kind of work and to change the paradigm, change the way in which we see politics. If we are in a coalition, we must see the coalition as a partnership of parties, where each party has its own role to play. And of course, there's some roles that we play collectively.
Yeah, well, I was basically targeting our supporters.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, there are lots of people who are despondent
Yeah.
and who are resisting registration. But they have to understand the importance of.
No, we have, not they have to understand. We have to go and explain it to them. You see, this is the thing. Sometimes we leave our supporters out there hanging for 4 years. And then we say, well, they must understand. Beyond people make decisions based on their own circumstances. If you don't live a house, you don't know where you leak. You and I are at a certain position in society, and we are on the politics day to day. We understand what needs to be done. The young man out there who has to look to see if he can get a 2-day walk to help his family where the money can meet, he's not thinking about the importance of registration. That's leadership. Leadership has to go there and to reason with those people, as we are doing here on this television with our thing. Sometimes we are too hard on our own people.
No,
I know you are not. I know you are not. But sometimes we are. I know them people in this coalition who, when they hear people are resisting to vote, they curse them. Oh, they're so stupid. They want Jack Dio to come back. That is easy to say that, but we have to realize the alienation that has occurred over the last 4 years.
Yeah, in keeping with that, when we had our meeting at BV,
Yeah.
One of the comments that I received after the meeting was, this was a better meeting, far better than the one that one of our members of the PNC went to BV to have. I mean, he accused the people of being stupid, that they never made that, you know, that they ain't really know what they, you know. I mean, it's a total, because he's going on behalf of the PNC in a sense, and people are dissatisfied with the way things are being done in their communities, the promises that were made that were not being kept. And instead of going there to appease the people, to bring them back on board, you're going to chastise and brand them as you know, foolish and stupid and, you know, that kind of thing. So I mean, the work of the WPA and the way we are doing our work, all right, is being congratulated even by the people who are on the ground, who are receiving the message in a different light. And I'm saying that to let the people, I mean, those people who are taking that approach, going to ridicule people, simply because when they go there, they want people to simply accept that this is it. When they're not recognizing that they are the cause of the way people feel and the way people are responding to them, that they need to take a different approach.
Right. And you're quite, and as we say in the WPA, yes, you may be despondent with the PNC, and one understands that they're the big party, they're the ones who've been driving the process. You may be despondent with the AFC because they're the second big party, they have plenty ministries, they have plenty things, and so on. If you're despondent with them, when you go to that box, cast your vote for the WPA. Say, when I put this vote next to the coalition, this is WPA vote. This is a vote for Dion Abrams. This is a vote for Tabitha Sarabo. This is a vote for Takuma Ogunse. This is a vote for Walter Rodney. This is a vote for all those martyrs who have stood on your side. As last night I was walking around our village, you know, as we were preparing for emancipation in this coming week, and I went by the monument, you know, to look, and we were, you know, looking at the physical layout to know where to put things and so on. And there were some men, young and middle-aged men there playing dominoes and thing. And they said, I said, well, are you register? They said, you them come by we yet, but we waiting. And they began to say, we are WPA. Because WPA teach we and feed we. And they're referring to the lessons place, which you know very well, and referring to the soup kitchen that we used to have there for over a decade and a half. And so I'm saying that there are certain sections of the population that we speak to. You know, sometimes people in the big media don't understand what's happening in places WP and I got no support and all those kinds of things. I tell you, Dion, I move around, I hear from people, you move around, hear from people. We cannot compete with the PNC for votes. Because people are going to vote for the party that has a better
Chance.
electoral track record and that has a better chance of winning against the other big party. But I guarantee you, if Guyanese are 2 votes, I'm saying among PPP supporters and supporters of the coalition, most of them will give their second vote to the WPA. And there is such a thing as 2 votes. It's something that political analysts have been talking about. But I'm saying that to say that there is a role for our party, and we intend to play that role, not because we want power for ourselves, but because we feel that the country would be in a better place with a coalition government in which the WPA is a part.
Okay. So, supporters of the coalition, register.
Yes.
Make sure that, we're calling on those who don't have their birth certificates to approach us, and we can help you to get that.
Yes.
Kidaki, Brother Kidaki in Buxton is on the ball with that. You buy the form, for
Yes.
$300.
Mm-hmm.
We help you to fill it out, and we take you through the process of getting your birth certificates so that you can be registered. So that shouldn't be a difficult.
And they say that process can
Right.
take as little as 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
So,
You're within the period.
you're within the period of 3 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Of registration. So everyone can come on board. Don't be afraid. We know that there are some people who are running from registration because maybe we have a problem of literacy. All right? We can help you with that too. Don't be afraid to register if you have difficulty with reading and all of these things. It's not going to prevent you from registering. All right? Because you don't have to read anything and all of that. The information will be presented to you. You just provide the information to the person who is recording, and then you do your little signature.
Right.
And that is the process. So it's nothing that is intimidating, that you should be afraid of. Come out, get registered. Because these elections are critical, they're important. It is the future for our children, for ourselves. And so just be prepared when the workers from GCOM approach you to be there. Now, you had a meeting at Linden, the WPA. What is the feel of Linden?
Yeah, we had a community meeting there as we did in Buxton and BV. And Linden, as you know, is a special place. A place that is steeped in struggle. Walter Rodney called them the cradle of the working class. The bauxite industry, of course, was very pivotal in shaping the thinking of people in that. And I reminded the people of Linden that when some people abuse me out for bringing you naked, your dirty linen in public and criticizing the coalition and all that kind of thing, I reminded Linden that in the late 1960s when the PNC was in power, and the 1970s when the PNC was in power, and the 1980s when the PNC was in power, the bauxite industry would call strikes against the PNC. They vote for the PNC, but they would call strikes. Askren called a number of strikes, about 4 strikes in the late 1960s. And then you had organization like the Organization of Working People, who were sympathetic to the WP and so on. They were calling strike. There was the big Ryla strike in 1971, and then coming closer in 1983, there were the food strikes when a bauxite worker named Mr. Leach dropped down with bad feelings, as we say, fainted on the job, and the bauxite workers done tool in his department. And that spread to a general strike in the industry, and then it became a food struggle that lasted for 3 to 4 months. Because there was shortage of food. Workers were going to work in the morning with nothing on their stomach, and we had that situation. So we called them the Food Rebellion. And these were people who I suspect voted for the PNC, but they were standing up for their right under government that they belonged to. And when you remember the struggles recently in which 3 Lindeners were shot down gunned down by the PPP regime because they were defending the right to a subsidy on electricity. When they started that show, they did it on their own. The APNU didn't support them. I reminded Lyndon of that. So when people talk about you criticize the government. I'm from Buxton, and I like Lyndon. Buxton is a place that is very steeped in struggle. We vote for you, but we're not going to allow you to walk all over us and don't say anything. We would speak the truth. It doesn't mean that we are against you. And so it was in that spirit that we went to Linden. They were glad to see us because the WPA really, Linden and Buxton and parts of Georgetown here were the places that really the WPA grew out of and so on. So we've had a long relationship with that community, and they were very glad to see us come in the community after a number of years. We were able to speak to people on the streets, express their views to us. We, of course, had the meeting. And after the meeting, persons felt that the message at the meeting should be heard by all of Linden. And they literally commandeered me to go to the radio station. And I was on the radio station there for about an hour and a half, disseminating the message. So the message not only got to the community meeting, but it got to the whole of Linden. And there was a call-in program, and people called in and expressed their agreement with the stance of the WPA. One man said, proper talk. You want to come in and try to tell me a butter-up story? You come in and tell us the truth. Proper talk. I am a despondent voter, but I am going to vote for the coalition. And so I think that our message was well received. People asked us to go back, so we will be going back to Linden in a couple of weeks. This last meeting was on the Mackenzie side. Next time we're going to go on the Wisma side. And what we are picking up from the ground is again that people are despondent, but they're not going to cast their votes for the PPP. But they want our leaders to know that they're despondent. So the resistance is a kind of leverage that they're using. That's my reading. When people say, I ain't got time with them, they ain't perform, and so on, and but then they say, but we can't allow the other side. So people are using that vote as leverage to draw us into the community, to listen to them, and to ensure that we don't alienate ourselves from them as we did the last time around. And this thing, you don't whisper to people. I think the WPA position is that you speak about these things in the open. People say, well, if you say it in the open, Jack Dio can use it. Well, Jack Dio can use it even when you talk about it in private. You speak it in the open. You say publicly, we have erred and we intend to correct it. So we had a good experience in Linden. As I said, we felt that our position, our approach is in sync with what a lot of people are saying in their homes, among themselves, and so on. Here's it, they got a chance to link their thoughts with that of one of the parties in the coalition. We are very, very happy. Not because the WPA is doing it, and of course it helps our profile and so on. But we are very happy because we are contributing towards the coalition. The PNC does its part. It's a big party. It has a lot of resources, but it's unfair to leave everything to them. We have to play our role, and we have to play our role within our limitations, and we are doing that. As we told the people at Linden, we're not coming here to compete with our partners for your vote. Gone are those days. This is what the coalition meant. Coalition is important because we now not competing with each other for votes. What we are doing is that what you can do, we gonna try to do and make the coalition stronger, ultimately to make Guyana a better place. I'm excited. The WPA is excited to be on the road again. Next week, this coming week is Emancipation Week, so we're not interfering with that. But come the following week, we are going to try to touch at least 3 communities on the East Coast. Anns Grove, Victoria, and Golden Grove. If you are viewing this program, we are coming to your communities not this week, but next week after emancipation is over. And I think the following week we are going over to the west coast of Demerara. We're going to try to go to Stroudville and then Amstel. Those are the communities on our immediate radar over the first couple of weeks in August. And then we go back to Linden, particularly the Wisma side.
Yeah, I know, and even those communities. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how is it that, because we're having this feeling on the ground that people are despondent. Isn't it filtering up to the top? Because even in the Amstel, as soon as the coalition got to power, we were called there because of grievances that
Yes,
people had,
yes, I
particularly
remember
over
that.
plots of land that they
Yes,
said were
Vincent Alexander,
right,
you and I went
we
there.
went
Yes.
there to have discussions, and even recently, I was even called. The guy from there, Jacobs, called me to complain about the fact that the very lands that they were wanted to give to one guy, that they believe that land is ancestral land,
Yeah,
and so on.
yeah.
That they're still having problems overcoming that hurdle. And even though, remember, we tried to get the Minister of Communities involved, but they are still in that quagmire. So the despondency of those people, they're still feeling that.
Yes.
And nobody is going to them to try to appease them, to deal with their issues.
Well, yeah. I mean, I am sure that the messages are filtering up to the leaders. We have different approaches to things, and I don't want to sit here and to say what the leaders of other parties should do. I did a lot of that for 4 years, and I get a lot of cost for it. We all have different approaches. The WPA approach is one in which we to empathize and to sympathize with people's positions, even when we don't agree with the manner in which they are expressing it. Our position is that people have a right to be alienated. They have a right to be despondent, and we, the leaders, to feel, yes, and we, the leaders, have the responsibility to go and to talk with them, to give them assurances, and then, insofar as we hold office, to bring relief to them. That is what we have to do, and that approach comes out of our historical upbringing. Different parties. We have never been a mass electoral party. We have always been a party of advocacy, a party of struggle, a party of asking questions, and a party of speaking the truth. I know some parties have difficulty in saying, I am sorry, right? And I understand that well. The WPA has no difficulty in saying, we are sorry, we made mistakes. You see? And we are doing that. And the entire coalition, I am sure, will benefit in the end from it.
All right, well, we'll be down touching all these places, the Amstel,
Stroudville, yes, Victoria.
All of the places you've called so far are African Guyanese communities.
Yes.
What's happening with the Indo-Guyanese?
Well, as we move along, you see, this is crunch time, and we are. It is not that we are ignoring other communities, but as I said earlier, we have detected that part of our support base needs to be shored up, and that's what we are doing in the short run. That's what we are doing now. Once the big meetings and so on start, we are going to go in to other areas. But for now, our particular task is to try to hold the base together and to speak directly, not so much to those who are already converted. Even those we are not thinking to, yes, they're still supporters, but they're going to vote for you, right? We are thinking about those supporters, the WPA-ish kind of supporters, the people who are going to say, don't bring nonsense to me. Right? Those are the people we are targeting. And in our ethnically divided society, that's where our supporters are. I wish we had supporters in Enmore and Enterprise that we could go to. That's not the way our world works. There has to be a different strategy for those communities.
Yeah, but I want to remind those, particularly, the rice farmers
yes.
and all of those people who were victims of the Rice Producers Association and all of these things. I'm not hearing the complaints that they were raising. You know, their voices were always loud
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the fact that they're being robbed at the mill and all of these things. I get a sense that now they are enjoying better conditions
Yeah, yeah.
and better benefits
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
work there, even though from time to time the PPP media would try to
Yeah.
make it appear that things are not as good. But if things were not so good, then you would have had
Right, right.
all of these. And I was looking at the program, the PR program from the Ministry of Agriculture, and they are on the ball every time you have a problem with the farmers.
Yeah.
They're there to render the kind of assistance
Which
that
is
they
what
need,
government must
which
always
is
do.
right. And so I am hopeful that, you know, this kind of intervention, because even, you know, the PPP was so dominant and enforcing itself upon people that they didn't even consider their own supporters victims of their high-handedness.
Yeah.
And so when Dharamlal abused the Amerindians and told them, you know, that, you know, the government is doing so much for them and all of these things, that kind of control, they saw themselves as the architects and the arch,
Right.
you know, the real emperors and kings over and the lords over the people. So you have a government, of course, that is not treating you in that way. A lot of markets have been opened up. Mexico and all of these places, your rice is finding markets. You're getting better prices and so on. So considerations should be given to the good that the coalition has done.
Yes, and at some point the
relation.
coalition has to speak to the Indian Guyanese
Right.
community.
Yeah.
I am very clear about that. You know, mine, the WPA doesn't have the resources to be all over the place, and we wish that we could, but we don't. But you know, there has to be a strategy to speak to Indian Guyanese, because we would need Indian Guyanese votes if we're going to win.
Yeah, certainly. And well, let's hope that, you know, those crossover votes are going to be there to give us the kind of you know, not this one seat situation where you can have a Sharon Das.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the Sharon Das thing is not a simple thing. The Sharon Das thing is going to be prevented if the coalition is treated, all parties in the coalition are treated with respect.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about the Sharon Das thing, I think it's been a simplistic explanation. The more profound explanation is that if you have a one-seat majority and you have a coalition of different parties with different ideologies, different political outlook, you try as much as possible to make everybody happy, to give everybody ownership, to give everybody a stake in decision making. And I think we did a bad job at that. We contracted decision making to the cabinet. In the cabinet, the PNC has a large majority. The AFC has a fair bit of representation, and then you have other parties like the WPA got one seat. And so therefore, when you have one seat in a body of 20-something people, you don't have a voice. And so therefore, you have to WPA is not asking for 10 seats. What we're saying is that you should have other councils in the coalition where these voices that are not in parliament are able to weigh in on policy and to have their input. And that was the biggest mistake we made. And so a Sharon Das could have flown under the radar and we didn't detect him. And by the time we detected him, it was all over, right? The way you prevent the Sharon Das is not just in getting a 2-seat majority or 3-seat majority, is to respect your partners and know what they're thinking, because they're involved in decision making. If they're not involved in decision making, if you're carrying them to parliament only to say I, that is going to happen again. And we hope that we learn our lesson.
Okay, well, let's hope. I mean, you're a very optimistic guy.
And the WPA is optimistic too.
Okay.
We have to be optimistic. If you're in this business, you have to be optimistic, Dion. I mean, this is not about me.
I know.
If it were just about me, there's some decisions I would make that I'm not making now. And because it is the country, it you know, one has to be optimistic for the country. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I hope I share your optimism.
Yes, I know you do. Yeah.
All right. We have
Emancipation coming up. Yes.
What's the plans?
Oh, in Buxton, we're going to have our usual Buxtoners, if you're looking at the program, and people from nearby villages. We're going to have our big Kongasa. You know, other places have Soiree. We in Buxton have Kongasa, right? It's the same thing, where you meet and laugh and gaff and talk and reminisce and plan and so on. It's going to be on the 31st. We're going to have Nancy's story, kwekwe, poetry, dancing, laugh and gaff, old-time story, and so on. And we're going to have the political component. We usually have a keynote speaker, and the keynote speaker this year is going to be the Director General in the Ministry of Presidency, Joseph Harmon. He's going to be the major speaker. And so we're inviting villagers to come out. There's going to be the steel band. There's going to be a one-man band because, you know, there's the young people thing now. So we're going to have Super Cat there. You know, it kicks off at around 8 o'clock. At the line top, and so we're inviting people from the community and from neighboring communities to come to Buxton on the night of the 31st to ring in Emancipation Day. We start at 6 o'clock actually at the monument, because we have an Emancipation monument in Buxton, and we will have what we call the libation ceremony there. The apostolic churches or faithists or spiritual churches will all come together, and they will have a service at the monument, and libation. You yourself will be doing the libation, and then from there, that starts at 6, finishes at about 8, and then we move to the line top for the Kongasa, and that will go right up into the morning. So we're asking people to come out on Emancipation Day itself. We are going to have feeding, so we will feed the village as we usually do. We call it feasting and so forth. And our activities continue on the 11th. And I want you to put this on the calendar, because it's not just for Buxton, but for other areas. On the 11th of August, we're going to have our annual symposium, what we call the AUC Guyana Symposium. And the symposium this year is, the topic is the coming elections and the African Guyanese emancipation agenda. We have invited several speakers. We've invited Honorable Carl Greenwich, former Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have invited the Minister of Finance, Mr. Jordan, Winston Jordan. We have invited Mr. Hughes, Nigel Hughes. We've invited the CEO of ITPADA, Miss Sampson, Olive Sampson. So we have a range of speakers, and then we'll have local speakers and so forth. So we have a big emancipation treat. And on Sunday night, Sunday the 4th, we're going to have a dinner that is hosted by the Buxton Museum. You know, we have a museum in Buxton there, and they're holding a dinner on the night of the 4th, starting I think at 6 o'clock. Yeah. So if you want to support the museum, they're holding that fundraising dinner.
$4,000.
I think it's $4,000 a ticket. So you can, it's not so much what you're paying, but it's a contribution to a worthy, very, very worthy and important institution. The
museum has on the fort itself, they have their first anniversary
thing. We kicked off the thing today with a church service. This is the traditional churches. It was held at the Arundel Congregational Church, which was the first church that was built in Buxton. We had a wonderful service, very good sermon by Reverend Paulette Hannibal. We want to thank that church for hosting us this year.
Okay, all right, time has caught up with us. So, well, one thing, if you're an artist and you know, there are artists
Yes.
from other communities who may want to
participate. We want to say that we have our program, but if you're an artist and you want to do an item on the program, just let us know. Come there and ask for us, ask for me, ask for Dion, and we'll be very glad to have you on. We don't want to confine it just to Buxton and Buxtonian. If there are any Buxtonians who are not on the program and you want to contribute something to the program, please see us.
Okay, thank you very much for being here, Dr. Hinds. To the people out there, I want to say thank you for being with us, and I see you next week, same time, same channel, for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. You have a good night.